Hello everybody, how's it going? I hope you guys enjoyed our new opener. We put music to it. That is an artist named Nightmirror, Nitemirror, and his site is here. Let me show you guys before we get started. I'm pretty excited about tonight's episode because there's a lot of change happening and it's looking positive. But I wanted to present Nightmirror because he's another independent content creator kind of like me, and I love the idea of creating a network of people who create kind of cool things for the general public. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. We're not going to get into it right this second because we are a couple minutes early. We're going to talk about what the GOP is doing in the House especially. We're going to talk about some of the accountability they hope to bring to Washington. And we're going to focus specifically on Matt Gaetz because I think he's going to be a real mover and shaker over the course of the next few years. We're also going to look at some of the watchdogs calling for real accountability from the White House, specifically the snooping that was going on at Twitter, the back channels kind of that the feds had in these big tech platforms. We're going to talk about quote unquote Trump's election vendetta gets new life. And the reason that Newsweek titled it this is because they found classified documents at Biden's think tank, which is also funded by China. So it's very interesting. A lot going on here, and CNN is literally giving excuses for why this isn't like what Trump did. Trump, who has the power to declassify classified documents, is not at all, they're right, he's not at all like Biden, who took these documents while he was vice president and did not have the power to declassify them. So that'll be a lot of fun. We'll look at how CNN is trying to explain it. They're basically just saying orange man bad, but you guys expect nothing less from them. They're kind of repetitive and boring. We're going to talk about how childhood obesity has hit a new high, and they're recommending drugs and surgery for it, in contrast to the body positivity movement. And we will discuss what might be better. We'll be looking at one of my tweets where I ran a poll. And finally, we're going to look at an interesting phenomenon that's floating around Gen Z's cool things tide pool. And it's really an interesting idea. It's called Lucky Girl. I think it's called Lucky Girl Syndrome. Yeah. And it's basically where you decide that you're incredibly lucky and then ta-da, it turns out you actually are. So we'll break it down and we'll examine if there's any element of truth in that. And then if we have time, we can get into how many people have resigned from their work and what is going on there and which industries have been hardest hit. So if you're just now tuning in, thank you guys so much for joining me. The music before the show is from an artist called Nightmirror, Nite Mirror, so like Nightmare but more clever, and he's also an independent content creator. We're trying to do cool stuff with independent content creators, and we are really getting into it because I like the idea of new people doing new, unique things. So let me see if I can find this tweet that I sent out about childhood obesity, because that's going to be one of the big topics we talk about. Cool. I conducted a poll, so I'm going to move that to the end where we talk about that. All right, let's dive into it. I am really excited about this, and this is going to be fun, so let's go. House Republicans will now vote on abolishing the IRS and replacing a national income tax with a consumption tax after voting to strip agency of Biden-backed $72 billion in funds for 87,000 new staff. So I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a lot of hay being made over the 87,000 new IRS members and how they were going to try to audit every single $600 or greater transaction between private individuals. So it's looking like what's happening here is that the Republicans are saying, it's not a good idea, and we're going to try to get rid of these ridiculous numbers of new staff. So let's read. Georgia Republican Rep. Buddy Carter will bring forth the Fair Tax Act that he says would remove the need for an IRS entirely by simplifying the tax code. I love this idea. It would replace the national, corporate, and personal income tax and other taxes with a single consumption tax. The bill comes on the heels of a vote Monday night to claw back $72 billion of some $80 billion in additional funding Democrats gave to the IRS. The Republican-led House will vote on a bill to repeal the federal income tax and abolish the IRS altogether this Congress. The bill also gets rid of the death, gift, and payroll taxes. It further calls for repealing the 16th Amendment, which gives Congress the right to lay and collect taxes on incomes. A vote on the bill, which has 30 co-sponsors, was promised as part of a deal to get Kevin McCarthy the Speaker's gavel last week. It's not yet clear when the legislation will come to the House floor, but it's unlikely to become law. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I do like that they're pushing this, though, and I like that they're pushing it right out of the gate because this is exactly the kind of thing I want to see from Republican lawmakers. Even if it doesn't necessarily go anywhere, I want them to be pitching new ideas and pushing for compromises that result in the kind of positive changes that we need. I think it's unlikely to make a huge change like this all at once in any given circumstance, and I don't even think most Republicans would be on board with it. Whether or not they should be is up for debate, but the fact is that you have to have some kind of compromise when you're in politics, and you have to be willing to play ball a little bit. Now, one of the things that they found, or one of the things they came up with when they finally voted for McCarthy for Speaker, was they came up with all sorts of compromises, including making it easier to get rid of a certain Speaker of the House. So I view that all as incredibly positive, and I'm glad they got those compromises in. So this is an interesting play, so I'm curious what happens to this. This transforms the U.S. tax code from a mandatory, progressive, and convoluted system to a fully transparent and unbiased system that does away with the IRS as we know it. It's good for our economy because it encourages work, savings, and investment. That sounds great. Honestly, that sounds incredible. I think it's unlikely to happen because I truly believe that the complexity of the tax code is really what keeps the government doing that, because it makes it harder to make sure you're paying the right amount. Oh, I remember there was a viral tweet about somebody saying the government basically tells you that you have to guess how much you owe, and if you get it wrong, they'll put you in jail. And that's really kind of how it is, not to mention that like H&R Block and TurboTax and all of these other places are firmly monopolizing the government's use of taxes. But I digress. That's something that I don't have time to get into today. It's something I talked about a long time ago on one of my Instagram live streams before I started doing my channel. So I would like to look at that someday. Maybe one day we'll do a deep dive on that because it's really insane the way they have a monopoly over how you can perform your tax stuff. Let's look at this next thing they're doing. The U.S. House Republicans vote to go after Biden Justice Department. Yes. Awesome. Republicans controlling the U.S. House of Representatives voted Tuesday to launch an investigation into what they term President Joe Biden's weaponization of the federal government. But Democrats brand it a partisan fishing expedition, obviously. Republicans have been promising to use their new majority against the Justice Department, FBI, and other federal agencies investigating Republican former President Donald Trump and his supporters, who on January 6, 2021, stormed the Capitol. The party line vote on Tuesday aims to do just that, setting up a select subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government. The body is set to launch a wide-ranging probe of Democrat Biden's administration, which Republicans accuse of weaponizing the FBI against Trump. I will say that it's not just the Republicans saying this, because there's also this watchdog group. Watchdog calls for investigation of back channels between SBF-linked Democrat operations and Biden officials. So this isn't exactly the Department of Justice per se, although there's nothing to indicate that they weren't in some manner connected to these kinds of back channels between FTX, big tech, and the federal government. We know the FBI was heavily involved, likely the CIA, and all these other guys, and there's nothing to indicate that the Department of Justice wasn't also incredibly interested in all this stuff, because they were undoubtedly keeping a close eye on this in the wake of January 6th. I'm sure they were pressuring the big tech platforms to make sure that none of those users were ever able to have privacy again. But let's read a little bit about this because it's a slightly different topic. Use of activists' Slack channel by federal officials may have violated federal records laws. Today, ethics watchdog Protect the Public's Trust called for an investigation into numerous potential violations stemming from the close relationship between the members of the Biden administration and Sam Bankman-Fried, the disgraced former CEO of FTX. Specifically, PPT is requesting probes by federal ethics officials into possible violations of the Presidential Records Act and Federal Records Act, stemming from a private back channel for communications between the Biden administration officials and a Democratic operative tied to FTX. Media reports revealed prominent Democratic Party operative Sean McElwee had set up a channel on the Slack messaging app to communicate with Biden administration officials. Known to have easy access to the White House, Mr. McElwee was working on behalf of Mr. Bankman-Fried and FTX, with observers speculating that the channel was part of a strategy to shield crypto from government oversight. This back channel could have allowed administration officials to skirt laws governing official communications. Indeed, Mr. McElwee reportedly closed the channel upon SBF's indictment, potentially concealing these conversations from the American public forever. Under any circumstances, participation in such a platform by federal officials would constitute an affront to their duties to the American public and to the Biden administration's vows to adhere to the highest standards of ethics and transparency. However, when these officials' communications involve an agent attempting to influence policy and representing a firm whose leaders are currently under indictment for alleged fraud and money laundering, the issues of compliance, ethics, and transparency are even more significant. The situation at hand is possibly the tip of the iceberg with respect to communications conducted on private platforms by government officials. As the Twitter files have revealed, federal employees appear to have routinely used back channels to communicate with social media companies to monitor what they term misinformation by private citizens. I am so glad that a private watchdog is looking at this as well, because I know that anytime the Republicans say, oh, this might actually be a problem, the immediate backlash is going to be Democrats saying this is a fishing expedition, which is exactly what they said with the Department of Justice inquiry. It's obviously not the case. There's abundant evidence that they are doing very wrong things and really easily getting away with this. This is what happens when you have capture of all the institutions by one party. And I wouldn't expect it would be much better with the Republican Party, although at least Republicans are better at independent thinking, as we saw from the House Speaker kerfuffle. All right, and we're going to look at one of the biggest players in the GOP right now as we close this little segment about the current GOP actions. Matt Gaetz says defunding Ukraine should be top priority. I agree, 100%. How about we start funding the American people or not taking their tax money for Ukraine? Republican Representative Matt Gaetz said the U.S. should reconsider the amount of money it's sending to Ukraine as a top priority. Speaking to Fox News, Laura Ingraham on Monday, alongside Representative Lauren Boebert, Gaetz argued against politicians refusing to consider reducing America's defense spending. This would include people like Dan Crenshaw. Host Ingram highlighted that attempting to reduce how much money is put into defense spending would be a controversial issue for many Republicans. Of course it would. Republicans love defense spending. Despite this possibility, Gaetz said the U.S. should cut the amount of money going to Ukraine before reducing its defense spending, a point he felt would be agreeable among Republicans. He's probably not wrong. Ingram said the issue of defense spending, that is always treated as a sacred cow. You can never touch defense spending no matter how woke the Pentagon is, no matter how much scrutiny the Pentagon needs for its failures. We all support our men and women in uniform, but the idea that 55% of our discretionary budget can't be touched, those numbers don't add up with the cuts that you want. Unless you guys ultimately start cutting parts of the military. This must have been Laura talking. Answering the question, Gaetz said, we can defend this country and project power more efficiently and more effectively than we do. President Trump was the first president to demand an audit of the Pentagon. They couldn't pass it. Oh, I remember that. They messed that audit up big time. We got an audit to show where they failed to actually deliver on some of the authorities. How about we start with Ukraine before we reduce what we do for our troops? That's a great idea. I think it is a pretty easy case to make that some of this money that we send to Ukraine without requisite accountability should be the first place for reduction. Gaetz has repeatedly publicly denounced how involved the U.S. has been with Ukraine as it fights Russia and President Vladimir Putin. Good. Last week, Gaetz was accused of being on the side of Putin as he sent a tweet mocking Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Let's be real, he deserves all the mocking he can get. After that, the chamber came to a standstill as now House Speaker Kevin McCarthy failed to win enough votes to secure the position. Yeah, okay. In reference to that, Gaetz tweeted, "Today the House didn't organize. Biggest loser, Zelensky. Biggest winner, U.S. taxpayers." What's wrong with saying that? I disagree that he's mocking Zelensky with that tweet. All right, so I'm very excited with what the GOP is doing at the moment. Looking forward to more from them for sure. Maybe they will actually decide to do something with the power they've been given. Let's see what you guys are thinking about this new and improved GOP. Oh, wow. The chat is popping. Thanks, guys. Glad you're all enjoying the music before the show. Volume of the music should match the volume of the show/audio. Yep, we're going to be fine-tuning that as we go on. Agree with Ron if you can match the level. Yep, for the master. Okay, cool. Should check out Electric Cowboy. All right, so I'm also wanting to use music from Akira the Don that you guys may recognize. I find his music to be incredibly inspiring and he is okay with me using it, so I'm very excited to use some of that. Hopefully, I know that you guys are going to love it. We need to transition. We do. I really wanted the music to fade out so that I could start talking, but that's another thing that we'll have to be working on, and we'll definitely get there. Good to see Sarah Patchley doing it on her own. Thank you. It's a work in progress. Is Andy in the corner pushing all the buttons? No, but he did offer to pull things up for me tonight. I was not sure how that would work because we're not sitting at the same computer or anything, but he did offer. At least fade the music instead of cutting it straight off. Yeah, I completely agree. Hello. Thank you, Sleep Colors Music, for your super chat. Hi, Lids. Love the intro. I, too, am an independent content creator. I am Sleep Colors on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Music for relaxation needs. Awesome. Maybe we could use that as our outro music. That might be fun, too. Ayo, I'm kind of early once again. Hello, Johnny. Welcome. Ooh, I resigned from my work. I'm one of those. Oh, boy. We'll see if we get into the Great Resignation. It looks like we might because we cover that first topic relatively quickly. I have noticed that the USPS can't seem to hire anyone and is struggling to recover the employment. Andy says we want to collaborate with people and build culture. That's correct. That is the whole point. Bert Kreischer thinks that nightmare is actually pronounced nightmare. Wonder if there was an inspiration. Possibly so. We'd have to ask. The Liberty Gal says, Andy, I'm getting ready to launch my podcast. Are you looking to collab with another new podcasters? Actually, I think that would be really cool to collab, especially with another lady podcaster. We'll see what we can do there. We've got to figure out the guest thing next. What's up, everyone? What's up? Restarting the discussion is a good place to start. I agree. Right at 6 o'clock, I'm going to try to recap and tell everybody where we're going to, and then we're off and running. It's a feel-good moment to rally the base, but between the tax code being complex, to your point, also you need all three branches unanimously backing, and they won't. Of course they won't, but I do like that this is a shot across the bow, and I hope that this displays what the GOP is going to try to accomplish this term. Am I the only one that had to double read that? Because I totally misread. Possibly. Hopefully not. Resident Degenerate reporting for duty. Welcome. We're having a good time over here. Thank you all. I see Andy's up in the chat. Oh, good stuff. Wake Up Waverly is doing some really fun promo videos and stuff for us. We've got a lot of friends that create content of various kinds, and of course we want to see what you guys are doing as well. Absolutely, you guys are more than welcome to tweet at me. That is 100% the best way to get a hold of me. I think that it might be really fun to kind of showcase what you guys are up to. I know a lot of you guys are really talented artists, and we would love to put that kind of stuff on display, point people in your direction. Always seems to be catching up. Your intro song at 1.75 speed sounds freaking awesome. Good. I'm glad to hear it. All right, y'all. I got a show to prep for. I'll watch the VOD. Everybody have a great night. You too, sir. Peace is found at a table. Negotiations is cheaper for the taxpayer. I agree. So you do have to play politics a little bit. It's very much a game of give and take. It's a lot like any human relationship in that if you want it to last, you need to be willing to make compromises. So we'll see what happens. Taxation equals theft, says Andy, and I'm inclined to agree. But with the system that we have now, we've got to see if we can find a better solution to make things work more easily. All right, I think we're going to switch over to this. I wanted to pull up this tweet from CNN. I'm scared. I don't want to show you guys what they're saying. CNN. Let's see here. Let me switch so you guys can see what I'm up to. Too many buttons, not enough time. There we go. All right, so they had like a little chart thing showing the differences between, there we go. So in case you guys weren't aware, they found classified documents at one of Biden's think tanks. And what happened was he acquired these while he was vice president, not president, and had no power to declassify them. So let's see how CNN spins this one, because it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I'll give them that. There are clear distinctions between the two classified document cases involving President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. Here we go. Classified documents found. Joe Biden. 10 total documents. Some top secret. Cooperating. Lawyers found and alerted archives. Donald Trump. Evil Orange Man. At least 325 total documents. 60 were top secret. Under investigation for obstruction, and archives first reached out to the Trump lawyers. Oh, it's clear. It's clear that Trump was trying to do evil things. Someone says, LOL, of course. Looks like you're missing a key distinction. Would CNN report it any other way? Gaslighting at its finest. LOL at the verbiage when comparing the two. Yes, one had them for 6 years and didn't have the power to declassify them. The other had barely been out of office for 2. And when he was in office, he had the power to declassify them. That's a key distinction that CNN is failing to mention, which is very interesting. I agree. Well, let's see what's happening here. This is from Newsweek. Trump's election vendetta gets new life. Well, understandably so. Let me see if I can move this over a little bit so you guys can see more. There we go. Okay, that's right. By the time President Joe Biden scrambled to address revelations he may have improperly removed classified materials from his time as vice president, his predecessor Donald Trump was already on the attack. That's because Donald Trump is quick and Joe Biden has mashed potatoes for brains. On Tuesday, numerous media outlets reported Biden had allegedly taken fewer than 12 assorted intelligence briefing memos dating back to his time in the Obama White House, storing them in an office Biden used as part of his tenure as an honorary professor with the University of Pennsylvania from 2017 to 2019. The White House has since said in the documents retrieved from the office, which Biden allegedly didn't know were there, are, quote, not of high interest, close quote, to the intelligence community, whereas everything involved with Donald Trump is of incredibly high interest to the intelligence community, and that should be telling. Like, that should bother us that our intelligence community is so fixated on Donald Trump, whether he's in office or gone. White House officials told reporters Monday Biden aides, according to media reports, first discovered the documents on November 2nd. This is before the midterms, after which the White House said they immediately notified the National Archives and Records Administration. Some, including the former president of the U.S., suggested there's more to the story. I wonder why. Shortly after the Biden White House confirmed what had happened Tuesday, Trump, who is currently under federal investigation for a similar transgression, yes, that's correct, the FBI raided his house, took to Truth Social to comment on the news where he suggested the delay in announcing the document's discovery was intentional, namely to save the Biden White House from scandal several days before the crucial 2022 midterm elections. Why didn't the, quote, Justice Department announce the highly classified documents found in the Biden office before the election? All good questions. There's still plenty that isn't known about the documents. Biden's team, according to a CNN report, was caught largely flat-footed by the news and had yet to release a formal media statement. In Mexico for trilateral talks with the Mexican and Canadian presidents, Biden also did not take questions from reporters, according to pool reports, though White House counsel Richard Sauber provided a statement to CBS News Monday night, noting the documents, unlike those seized from Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago last year, were not subject to any previous request or inquiry by the archives. Since that discovery, the president's personal attorneys have cooperated with the archives and the Department of Justice in a process to ensure that any Obama-Biden administration records are appropriately in the possession of the archives, he wrote in a statement. Okay, great. Good for you. Good for you. It's still an open question whether the nature of the material seized from Biden's office compares to those found at Trump's Florida compound. That's a very valid question. Do they? Do they not? Though little is known about the documents seized from Mar-a-Lago, the Biden cache of documents announced, according to media reports, included fewer than a dozen U.S. intelligence memos and briefing materials covering topics including Ukraine, Iran, and the United Kingdom that are now currently under review by the U.S. Attorney in Chicago. Blah, blah, blah. Trump had more than that. No big deal. Again, Trump was president at the time that he took these documents, and the president does have the power to declassify these documents. They held this information until after the midterm, which is clearly a political play. And I don't think that CNN is looking at this rightly, surprising as that may be. So I wanted to clear that all up for you guys, and I hope you enjoyed that peek at CNN and what they've been up to. I know nobody tunes into them anymore. Let's see, actually. Can the vice president declassify documents? Let's find out. Oh, discovery of Biden documents sparks debate over vice president's declassification powers. How interesting. It's the perfect article. The discovery of Obama-era classified documents in President Biden's former office in Washington has sparked a debate over whether vice presidents have the power to declassify sensitive materials. From my understanding, they don't, but I could be wrong. That's always the case. The documents found in packing boxes at Penn Biden Center in Washington. Blah, blah, blah. We already read this stuff. The scope of government officials' classification powers has generated heightened interest since the FBI raided Mr. Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in August and seized classified documents. FBI agents carried out the search as part of a Justice Department probe. This is part of the reason the Republicans are investigating the DOJ into whether Mr. Trump illegally withheld the material when they were shipped to Mar-a-Lago. Mr. Trump made the president's power to declassify documents a central part of his defense. He insisted that the president can declassify just by saying it's declassified, even by thinking about it. Okay, I don't know if he can do that by thinking about it, but this is part of the big ask that Trump likes to use. He likes to point past the sale, and then when you say, actually, you can't, he says, fine, just by saying it's declassified, that's enough. The vice president's declassification powers are even less clear. A March 2003 executive order signed by President George Bush empowered the vice president to declassify sensitive material. That same executive order grants declassification power to the official who authorized the original classification or a supervisor official. Under the executive order, vice presidents are granted the power to declassify documents they classified themselves. But it's unclear if the vice president would be viewed as where's the rest of this? Come on, Washington Times. And now we lost it. Or a supervisor official. Yeah, okay. A supervisory official with the ability to declassify sensitive documents from the CIA and other intelligence agencies. That leaves it muddled whether a vice president can declassify documents. Okay, so one thing we do know for sure. The president can declassify whatever documents he so chooses. The vice president, very murky. It looks like maybe in some instances, if he were the supervisory person in this role regarding whatever documents are in question. A VP cannot declassify documents which are covered by the Federal Records Act, which is criminal and much tougher than the Presidential Records Act, which is not criminal. A president, me, can declassify, Trump posted on his social media platform. Mr. Trump's allies have heavily leaned into that argument. They made it clear that they intend to emphasize that point while discussing the Biden revelations. What was really interesting, probably the most interesting thing to me about the Mar-a-Lago document discovery was that they were not nuclear codes. From what I can tell, these were things that Donald Trump had kept as mementos, things that he found interesting during his time in the White House. And it's not clear, they haven't been able to make the case that Donald Trump kept any of these things with any sense of malice. And you can bet your booty that they would have if they could have. Kind of the same with his taxes. If they had been able to find any dirt on his taxes, you can bet your bottom dollar that that's exactly what they would have done. Let's see what you guys are thinking about this. This is kind of an interesting topic, but I know it's a little bit nuanced. I'm really not sure about the declassification powers of the vice president. That's never really been my focus. Who will pay for the roads? Private companies, neighborhoods. A company will make sure that they can deliver their product. Neighborhoods will make sure they can get home. Yeah, exactly. I think we will try to have a different music playing at the intro, so if you'd like to submit some, please send a 15-plus minute playlist of your music in the form of an MP3. Yes to abolishing the IRS. I agree. Andy has ways into your screens. That's right. Andy's an elite hacker. There are no tax breakers. You don't get to pay tax breaks. You don't get to pay a charity and get to not pay your tax, your 10%. Wherever your company is, that's who gets to 10%. Physically, Walmart, every store pays that town. Interesting. Keyword is classified. Once you break the classified protocol, you're breaking the law. Interesting. But did Trump do that? From my understanding, he did not, because he could declassify all those documents. I don't really care about them having documents where they shouldn't. Yeah, I don't really either, but I just want to highlight the hypocrisy, as you can see clearly from that CNN tweet. It's old, it's boring, we know they're bloody hypocrites, and there's no solution to it. The media are just the Democrats' lapdog, and that's never the way it should have been. Journalists were meant to hold every institution accountable. I mean, teachers' unions, the president's office, all of this stuff should be held accountable by journalists, and they're not. It's too easy and too quick for journalists to jump in on some special interests kind of loop. And then they just cite each other until the lie becomes the truth that people understand and remember. I've seen it happen again and again. I hate it. It's frustrating, but it's one of those things that I personally can't do anything about because I'm just one person. But I'm hoping that by bringing you guys some of this information, you can kind of draw your own conclusions as far as that goes. And then you can see, what some of the differences are between the truth and the fiction. I just remembered I wanted to talk about Ron DeSantis. There was an article, yes, can Ron DeSantis avoid meeting the press? And I am about to make the case that not only can he absolutely must, because one of the things that took Donald Trump down toot sweet was his desire to be accepted by the mainstream media. Parker Malloy is an activist. This is a little bit of a tangent, but an activist author for, I believe, Media Matters. Recently came after none other than David French for being anti-trans, when the whole reason that actual conservatives view David French as a lapsed conservative is because he took the side of trans activism. He's the one who called Drag Queen Story Hour a blessing of liberty, and he got roundly thrashed by Sohrab Ahmari in an open debate. That's a little bit off the beaten path, but I want it to be known that you can't make these people like you. It doesn't matter what you do. David French at this point is far too far left for conservatives, and he's not far enough for activists like those at Media Matters. So there is no peace with the people who want basically your head on a silver platter. They want to destroy you. They want to ruin any chance you have at any kind of political power. So we're going to read this New York Times article because sometimes they come up with some good stuff. Sometimes they don't. More often they don't. Can Ron DeSantis avoid meeting the press? The Florida governor easily won re-election despite little engagement with mainstream news articles. Oh, so what you're saying is that it's entirely feasible that you literally win your election in a landslide without ever doing an interview with the New York Times. That's great. That's good news. That's a strong start to this article. Another sign of partisan division ahead of the 2024 presidential race. Now, why would it be partisan to not want to speak to the press? If the press weren't in the pocket of the Democratic Party, would you be calling this partisan? I wouldn't. I bet you a nickel that Ron DeSantis has been on with Tucker a bunch of times. I'm pretty sure he has. It would be weird if he hadn't been. But that doesn't mean... It doesn't mean that he needs to speak to the New York Times. That would be partisan. Now, why would you go engage with somebody who's never going to quote your full sentence? Somebody who's going to clip you out of context, left, right, and center. You shouldn't. You shouldn't. You absolutely shouldn't. And right up till the bitter end, Donald effing Trump was trying to get the press to like him. He was giving interviews left and right. And it did not work out for him. It didn't matter what it didn't matter what he did. It didn't matter what he said. They hated him. They dragged him, and it didn't make a lick of a difference. Anyway, we have started with the subtitle of this article, and we're going to read the whole thing. Oh, part of it. Assigned to cover the re-election campaign of Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, Miles Cohen, a young ABC News reporter, found himself stymied. Good. The governor would not grant him an interview. Good. Aides barred him from some campaign events and interrupted his conversations with supporters. Good. When Mr. Cohen was finally able to ask a question about the governor's handling of Hurricane Ian, Mr. DeSantis shouted him down, "Stop, stop, stop," and scolded the media for trying to cast aspersions. The DeSantis campaign then taunted Mr. Cohen on Twitter, prompting a torrent of online vitriol. My goodness, wouldn't it be terrible if the mainstream media ever pointed a finger at someone who didn't deserve it and prompted, quote, a torrent of online vitriol? Oh, you mean like CNN did with a man who made a meme about Donald Trump? They tracked him down. They threatened to dox him. They got him to admit that he wouldn't be making any more of these posts because they could at any time release his personal information like that? That kind of online vitriol? Okay, New York Times, please sit down. So in election night, Mr. Cohen decamped to a friendlier environment for the news media, Mar-a-Lago, where former President Donald Trump greeted reporters by name. See, Trump liked the attention from the media. He wanted to be their friend. This was part of his downfall. He came up to us, asked how the sandwiches were, and took 20 questions, Mr. Cohen recalled. That's way better than Biden does. Mr. Trump, who heckled the fake news in his speech that evening, elevated media bashing into a high art for Republicans. But you just said that Trump took questions from you and he was interested in answering what questions you might have brought to him. So he might have been bashing the media, but at the same time, he was willing to talk to you. What do you want? Do you want people to talk to you, or are you just going to make fun of them for bashing the media? And you just said yourselves that it's not bipartisan of him to avoid the press. This is ridiculous. But ahead of the next presidential race, potential candidates like Mr. DeSantis are taking a more radical approach, not just attacking nonpartisan news outlets, but ignoring them altogether. Good. Although he courted the right-wing podcasters and conservative Fox News hosts, Mr. DeSantis did not grant an extensive interview to a national nonpartisan news organization during his 2022 re-election bid, and he coasted to victory, with Rupert Murdoch's media empire now promoting him as a 2024 contender. What nonpartisan news organization are you referring to, New York Times? Are you referring to, what is it, ABC? Is that where Miles Cohen is from? Yeah, ABC. Because ABC is not nonpartisan. Not at all. There are barely any nonpartisan news organizations left. His success is an ominous sign for the usual rules of engagement between politicians and the press as another nationwide election looms. Presidential candidates typically ensure media scrutiny in exchange for the megaphone and influence of mainstream outlets. But in an intensely partisan, choose-your-own-news era, the traditional calculus may have shifted. I do agree that it is a choose-your-news era, and you have to ask why that is. The old way of looking at it is, I have to do every media hit that I possibly can, from as broad a political spectrum as I can, to reach as many people as possible, said Nick Iarossi, a longtime DeSantis supporter and lobbyist in Tallahassee. The new way of looking at it is, I really don't need to do that anymore. I can control how I want to message to voters through the mediums I choose. That's correct. And the fact of the matter is that you should be willing to speak to the media if you think that the media is going to report you fairly and give you a fair shake. If you know that, for example, ABC is going to clip you out of context and use you 6 ways from Sunday, why would you speak to them? There's really no benefit for you. It's not like you're speaking to your possible supporters. You are speaking to partisans. If you were to talk to, for example, the New York Times, you would not be speaking to anyone who might possibly be persuaded to vote for you. You would only be putting yourself on the stockade for people to throw tomatoes at you. You know that every single person who reads the New York Times absolutely hates your guts and wants you to lose and be drawn and quartered. It's ridiculous to assume that anyone should be forced to give interviews that they don't want to give, because they're right. News is very partisan. You would think that this admission would cause a little bit of self-reflection from the New York Times, but I think they're incapable of it, so let's continue. In 2022, Mr. DeSantis was not alone. Doug Mastriano, the Republican who ran for governor of Pennsylvania, engaged almost entirely without conservative media news. Unlike Mr. DeSantis, Mr. Mastriano lost. Badly, says the New York Times. In Maryland and Wisconsin, reporters covering the Republican candidate for governor were often given no notice for some events, resorting to Eventbrite pages and social media to find a candidate's whereabouts. Good. On a national level, the Republican Party announced last year that it was boycotting the Commission on Presidential Debates, the nonpartisan group that has organized general election debates since 1988. We fully expect candidates will be rewriting the traditional rules of access and how they interact with journalists, said Rick Klein, political advisor, political director of ABC News, which featured Mr. Cohen in Power Trip, a documentary series about young campaign reporters. He's sure getting his moment in the sun. Could a presidential candidate realistically avoid the mainstream media entirely? I don't think it's been done before, Mr. Klein said, but I think the last couple years in politics has taught us there's lots of rules that get broken. Mr. DeSantis' strategy would face its biggest test if he pursued a presidential bid, a decision he has so far demurred on. In Florida, Mr. DeSantis occasionally spoke with local TV affiliates and entertained shouted out questions from the state's press corps. But a national contest would require him to introduce himself to a broader audience, and while primary race would focus on Republican voters, it is often independents and centrists who decide the fine margins of the Electoral College. This much is true. Although partisan podcasts and niche news sites are increasingly popular, few outlets can match the reach of traditional broadcast and cable networks. So what they're saying is, centrists and moderates decide elections. How many centrists and moderates read the New York Times? I'm genuinely curious, and I think we're going to look that up next. The thing they say next, although partisan podcasts and niche news sites are increasingly popular, few outlets can match the reach of traditional broadcast and cable networks. So what they're saying is, we're powerful, you have to give us an interview. I don't think that's true. And I think that Ron DeSantis winning Florida in a landslide just proves that. You can't just talk to friendly press and run TV ads and expect to win a nomination, said Alex Conant, a partner at the consulting firm Firehouse Strategies, who served as communications director to Senator Marco Rubio of Florida. I think you can. It appears to have worked for Ron DeSantis, and I agree that he might have to rethink his strategy if it comes to running for president. But I don't think that the New York Times is the place you want to go. I don't even think that ABC is a particularly good option, especially since I believe ABC is the news organization that buried the Epstein story. Let's see here. I've got to fact check myself. ABC News defends its Epstein coverage after a leaked video of Anchor. That was them. It was ABC News. ABC is not unbiased. ABC is incredibly tilted and incredibly corrupt, it looks like. So let's see. Moderates and independents who read the New York Times. Ooh, your as in yours. Nice. Let's see if we can find a chart or graph showing. Yeah, okay, I was afraid of that. I was hoping we could find a really simple graph of the people who read the New York Times. Let's see. New York Times readership by party affiliation. Gotta be a little creative sometimes. Okay. So we have left and lean left comprise a total of almost 70%. Only 16% center, 12% lean right, 4% on the right. So that's about what I expected. Oh no, you know what? Let's see here. Blind bias survey. All sides asked over 2,000 people across the political spectrum to rate the bias of content. So this isn't the people who read the New York Times. My bad. That's why I don't try to move too quickly. That's the other thing. The incredible shrinkage of the New York Times. So we've gone from huge heights of revenue and slumping numbers in 2010, even though that was a while ago. I just want the people who read the New York Times. All right. Well, it looks like we're not going to be able to find this information on a dime, but that's okay. Let's see here. Let's read what you guys are thinking, because this is kind of an interesting topic. I always like to read places like the New York Times just to see what they're thinking. I know that most of the time we're forced to listen to what all these people say, and it's kind of hard to avoid, but it's good to actually really read the full articles and see what they're really thinking. All Trump had to say was that these are declassified, and they would be. That's correct. I believe so. I think it's a blanket power. He can basically wave his hand and say they're declassified from what I understand. That's right. If Trump did declassify them, can they be released to the public? I don't know. Afghanistan, auditing the Defense Department, these machines are millions of dollars each. Ukraine's neighbors sell more efficient craft at a fraction of the cost. I think no, because if it's part of an active investigation, technically. Andy says if he has the power to unilaterally declassify them, why would anyone make a big deal about whether or not he actually did the procedure? Of course, it's obviously grasping at straws because Trump. Yeah, exactly. The VP has no declassification authority. Yeah. So what George Bush said in 2003 was that if they were like a supervisory officer or if they had classified them initially, they could declassify in some instances. Not sure where we stand with that now. Oh, yes. Andy came up with a name for this show. The name of this show is Trad Queen Story Hour. I really like his naming abilities and I really like that name. So I think we're going to roll with it and we might have to make a title about it. Katie Hobbs never met with the press either, right? Oh, I don't know if she did. Boston Tea Party, how much was the stamp tax? Yeah, don't get me started. We left the English colonies over much less. Ran DeSantis, thanks Andy for making fun of me for calling Ron Ran. All super chats will be directed toward a use of your choosing. Oh, yeah, we should decide how to do that. Matt Gaetz is going to run in 24. I have seen that floated. He would make a great vice president, just saying. He has what it takes. I turned down every single interview from the MSM except for one, says the lectern guy. That is Adam. Hi, Adam. How's it going? I saw how they trashed me and had no desire to give them... Where did it go? No, come back. Another chance. 100%. I think that DeSantis is smart and savvy, and I think he's doing the right thing. Good. 60 minutes to the hit piece, and the DeSantis team won't tolerate that again. 100% not. Absolutely not. Republicans can recommend, but it won't happen. Not sure what that's in reference to. It's okay for news to be partisan if they're honest about it. Yeah, so what Andrew Klavan always used to say was that MSNBC was openly partisan, and he preferred that to somebody who was pretending to be nonpartisan. I think he said CNN was trying to act like they were nonpartisan when they clearly weren't, and he infinitely preferred MSNBC for their honesty, for which I do not blame him. Daily Wire is going to be a huge influence in the 2024 elections. Possibly so. Alt media are the only people who will give you a fair shake, no matter if you're progressive or conservative, and you have to even be careful then. Absolutely. You have to use your common sense. You have to make sure they use your full quotes and don't take you out of context. I'm betting conservatives and middle-of-the-road media is going to have a big growth in 2023 and 24. You'd be very happy to have Lectern Guy on the show. 100%. When did Biden talk to non-friendly press? Not only does Biden not talk to non-friendly press, he calls a very select list of reporters. He's got his little list. He tells people often, this is the list of reporters I'm supposed to speak to. Very carefully curated, and sometimes he doesn't answer any questions at all. So let's talk about media engagement, New York Times. Let's get it. All right, Trad Queen Story Hour. Trad is traditional. I'm very traditionally minded. Trad wife. Yes. Listen here. They call me Sour Patch Pool. Do they now? Interesting. Trade coffee for ads. Ooh, yeah. Good idea. I did take a little caffeine before the show tonight, so hopefully I'm a little less yawny than I am sometimes. I don't know what it is about this time of evening that makes me just want to like take a nap or maybe go to bed at like 5 p.m. I don't know what my deal is. I'm getting old. All right, you guys, we're going to talk about something totally different. And I think we're going to open with a poll that I ran about this particular topic. They're recommending surgery and drugs for children who are obese. Horrible, horrible idea. Among the worst. What should we do instead? And I gave 4 options. They're not at all, they're by no means exhaustive. But I said mandate, and that was because I didn't have room to say culturally encourage parents to push exercise, diet changes. Other option was remove sugar and seed oils and incentivize eating less. So we're going to walk through each one of these. I was kind of spicy on here because I was like, look, I know I had to say mandate, but it is interesting that the first thing that everyone always thinks of is the state. When I was a kid, my mom made it so that we never had cereal for breakfast. It was never even in our house. She gave us the choice of oatmeal. She gave us the choice of, I didn't mean to do that. Oatmeal, what else? Eggs. And then granola. She actually made granola. She used honey. She used rolled oats. She would often put peanut butter in it, which was really fun. And that was, I think she put wheat germ in it and stuff like that. And it was pretty good. Obviously we got bored with it because we only had a few different options for breakfast. But what I learned when I was eating breakfast as a kid was that carbs, especially oatmeal, made me hungry after like 1 hour. I remember every time I would eat oatmeal for breakfast, I would be 100% starving to death by like 10 or 11 a.m. And that's when I started to notice the difference between the things that you eat. I started to notice that protein and fat kept you fuller for much longer. And when I was losing weight in my late teens and then in my mid-20s, I started to view eating as an investment in my energy. So if I wanted sustained energy, I knew that I needed to eat less carbs, more fat, more protein. And that's exactly how I ended up losing weight. I've lost weight 2 different times. I lost it in my teens, and then I lost it again in my 20s. And the Lydia that you guys knew when I first started Timcast IRL was a very toned down version of myself. I was 180 pounds by the time I was 13 years old. I was also 5'11", so I was by no means obese. I was just very solidly built, and I worked very, very hard. When I was about 16, I remember when I graduated high school, I had worked my weight down to significantly lower than that, and I felt healthier. I actually was probably skinnier than I should have been, but I did feel more active. I felt healthier. I felt better about how I looked. Obviously very important for a teenage girl, but I digress. This was just something that my mom had laid out for us. Her mandate was that we watch our diet very carefully and we not eat hyper-processed foods. We almost never ate out because we had a big family and it would have just been kind of expensive anyway. We had little traditions where we would have frozen pizza on Thursdays and we would sometimes have pizza on Friday nights. And that was pretty much the extent of that. Definitely none of this DoorDash nonsense. But let's read some of these comments because people actually gave some really good ideas. I said, is removing sugar in conjunction with seed oils enough though? You can still eat too much cheese, tofu, chicken, and fruit. 100% true. You can get too many calories from any source. You need to balance what you eat and what you do. Let's see here. Incentives are good to me because I'm over removing and mandating things for people's health. It must always be a choice after the last 2.5 years. Yeah, I agree. I would say incentivize eating less, but it's too open to interpretation. Since the main problem is eating too much of the wrong kind of food, I opted for remove sugar and seed oils. Parents should be informed, 100%. Any mandate option is too authoritarian for medical care. Yeah, so my rote response to this, because I had a bunch of my more libertarian-minded people say mandates are a bad idea. I said it's kind of telling that you automatically assume that only the state can mandate something. When I was a child, my mother mandated eating either eggs, granola, or oatmeal for breakfast, no cereal, no soda, almost zero fast food. She enforced the rules. Somebody else commented, exercise can't fix a bad diet, which is 100% true. And I said if I had my way, we'd be changing the way people view food and feeling full and incentivizing them to eat less/smarter so they don't get hungrier for longer. The only one of these votes that allows choice is the last. Everything else, the choice is taken out. And again, I said it's kind of telling you automatically assume mandates have to be state mandates. They definitely don't. Parents enact rules all the time. It's very important that they do this. Somebody says, teach all humans about emotions and how to process them so that coping in any form becomes unnecessary. That's just a good idea all around. Somebody else says obesity tax, which is kind of an interesting idea. When I worked at the hospital, we had a very comprehensive and generous insurance rate that was tied to how fit you were or how you fit into their standards of what healthy looked like. And for a hospital, they had a pretty good grasp. I said, because my waist measured with the parameters, I never smoked, and my vital signs and labs checked the boxes, I got the discount. It was a very interesting system. Queen Bethany says there definitely needs to be some reform in the way food is created and marketed. Sugar is a low-grade drug. It needs to be treated like one. You can't put it in everything, and it shouldn't be processed the way it is. Sleep is also neglected, 100%. Somebody else says, cook better, no sugar, seed oils, and add more protein. Followed immediately by sending them outside or to the playground to play, 100%. Too many people are allowing electronics and fast food to raise their children. When I was a kid, when I was growing up, we had a thing called exercise. Yes, but that doesn't address the way the standard American diet has changed. Stop making things like soda and candy available on food assistance programs. That's a good point. 100%. And somebody else made the point about public schools trying to do the first 2 for decades, and the problem is only getting worse. Need to change the way we do agricultural subsidies. I pointed out that agricultural subsidies actually result in higher obesity rates. So this is all just the background. Really what I was going to point us toward is that childhood obesity requires early aggressive treatment, new guidelines say, and these early and aggressive treatments involved drugs and surgery instead of like free things like going outside, playing, getting vitamin D, and eating less. This is kind of interesting to notice that there's not a big lobby of people who are promoting intermittent fasting because it doesn't make money. It actually does the opposite. It means that people don't make certain money based on what you're not eating. So let's read what this article has to say. Children with obesity should be offered more intensive treatment options earlier, including therapy and medication, says leading U.S. pediatricians group. The American Academy of Pediatrics' new guidance on childhood obesity, the first in 15 years, moves away from watchful waiting or delaying treatment to see if children outgrow obesity. The group is advising pediatricians to offer treatment options early and at the highest available intensity for one of the most common chronic diseases among children. Untreated obesity is associated with a range of long-term health problems, including heart disease and diabetes. Can we just stop and address the elephant in the room that is body positivity, okay? I'm pretty sure that body positive activists are going to have a huge issue with this because apparently being fat is a good thing and beautiful and in no way indicative of any kind of health problem. There's actually an activist who was on Twitter saying that calling someone obese is actually a slur, and she got a context added saying that obesity is actually a huge problem and people die because of it all the time. And I actually tweeted at her because I was very sympathetic to her. In the most empathetic way I know how, I said, hey, look, obesity actually kills something like 3 million people every year. That's a big problem. People really care about you and they want you to live a longer, happier, healthier life. So they're going to recommend that you eat better. They're going to recommend you move more. She blocked me immediately, of course. But the fact of the matter is that this is the thing. I think I've said this before so many times. This is the thing that red pilled me on feminism. I was looking at the way the body positive movement acts toward women, and I said, you know what, if you actually care about women and you want them to live long, healthy lives and be able to see their grandchildren and possibly even their great-grandchildren, the last thing you're going to be doing is pushing body positivity and obesity acceptance. That is not the way to get women to live longer. That's incredibly unethical, and I don't like the way it looks. It's clear to me that feminism is not actually about caring about women. And ever since the inclusion of trans women and all this other stuff that's happened since then, it's very clear that they care little to nothing about actual women. They care about power and they care about virtue signals and all this other stuff that doesn't address any of the issues that actual women actually have. So I think that it's kind of interesting the dichotomy we have between, on the one hand, we have the American Association of Pediatrics saying that kids need surgery and medication for obesity. And on the other hand, I mean, that's incredibly unhealthy. On the other hand, you have the incredibly unhealthy body positivity movement. So it seems like you're darned if you do, darned if you don't. But either way, we do need to figure out what's going on because we do have a serious issue. I have been looking at seed oils because I've been so curious about what's going on there. And I say constantly, I'm like, why don't you just stop eating super processed foods? That would eliminate like 90% of your seed oil consumption anyway. But I was looking at a graph of sugar consumption over time in the standard American diet, and that's rising. And then we didn't start to get into a super obesity crisis until we started to pair sugar up with seed oils. And I think that might actually be the difference. I know that most people don't realize this, but sugar's in everything, and it turns out that so are seed oils. So in tandem, I think these two things create a kind of food that's functionally toxic to the human body, ultimately resulting in the breakdown of all the systems, high blood pressure, heart attacks, heart disease, obesity, and all this other nonsense. Let's finish this article and then we'll wrap up because it's already almost 7. The goal is to help patients make changes in lifestyle, behaviors, or environment in a way that is sustainable and involves families in decision-making at every step of the way. Dr. Sandra Hassink, an author of the new guidance and vice chair of the AAP's Clinical Practice Guidelines Subcommittee on Obesity. The most effective intervention require upwards of 26 hours over 3 to 12 months of intense in-person behavior and lifestyle treatments for healthcare providers. Such treatments include coaching on nutrition, physical activity, and changes in behavior, such as role modeling by parents. Yeah, 100%. This approach should be used by kids 6 and older and may be recommended for those as young as 2 and their families, the AP says. But it acknowledges that this kind of time-consuming treatment is not universally available and is often difficult to deliver. Look, if you have kids, you owe it to your children to give them every tool at your disposal to make sure that they are as healthy as possible. My mom made us granola. She had us eat eggs or oatmeal for breakfast, and she never gave us soda. That is one gift that she gave us. My dad took me aside when I was 13, and he asked me how much I weighed. I was getting a little chunky there. And I said, I'm about 180. And he said, you weigh about as much as your mom should weigh. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. She's a lot older than I am, etc. Although to be fair, at the time, still, she was shorter than I was. But it was still eye-opening to me, and I remember it quite clearly. Even though my dad was not fully up on all the details of what weight I should have been at that age, it still was enough for me to start to take notice and to pay attention to what I ate and to start to move more. My mom also made it possible for us to work out 3 times a week. We were homeschooled, so that was our form of PE. The ladies all went to the Curves gym, and we had a nice time. There were no guys there, very relaxed environment, and that was ultimately where I ended up losing a lot of weight, and it was really empowering to me to be able to do that. That's what I think body positivity should be. My body positivity ticked up remarkably as soon as I started paying attention to what I ate and how I moved. And then I ended up feeling a lot better because of that. And I wish that the people involved in the body positivity movement would make that effort for themselves. But this is the kind of person who is so set in their ways that they're unwilling to admit when they're wrong. And it honestly seems like they're more content to be miserable than to actually make a change. I think it's the whole victimhood culture thing, but I must digress. It is now almost 7 p.m. and I want to see what you guys are thinking. So let's see. Sugar is scary. I'm trying to cut it a lot out. And when I do have it, I use small amounts of actual organic cane sugar. Yes. Remember that sugar is sugar, and it doesn't matter what form it's delivered in. If it's delivered in coconut sugar, might be a little bit better because it might have a little fiber with it. Doesn't matter. Still sugar. If it comes in the form of honey, doesn't matter. Still sugar. You got to look at reducing the overall amount of sugar in your diet. Basically, drink olive oil and not get fat. Wow, geez. I didn't know that. That's crazy. I hadn't heard that. I don't think that's true, though, because from my understanding and from my personal experience, it is 100% calories in, calories out. That's why you can eat super keto, but if you're not tracking how much you eat, you can gain weight and you will certainly stagnate. You must be paying very close attention to what you're eating. Let's go back up to where we were. Andy's talking about nerd stuff. Okay, cool. Best to go on a low-carb diet. I am inclined to agree. Like I was saying, eating is an investment. If you're eating something sugary, this is 100% a short-term investment. Now, if that's what you need, if you need a quick burst of energy, sometimes sugar is the right way to go. But you need to pair it with fiber so it fills you up a little bit and you're not just more likely to have a sugar crash and then to eat more. Because I think I figured this all out, guys. Americans eat so much sugar and it gives us that sudden rush and it gives us that energy that makes us feel better, and then we immediately crash and look for more food. So overall, you're eating more calories because what you are eating is not giving you the level of satisfaction that you would find if you were looking at fats, if you were eating it with fiber, and if you were eating protein alongside of it. So reduce the sugar, focus on fiber, fat, and protein, 100%. And healthy carbohydrates, like fruits. It doesn't have a proper name yet, still working on that, but it's a great beta version ready for testing. Carnivore here, good for you. Carnivore is very challenging. I need some form of variety in my diet. I have 4 kids. They all do sports and work out with me all the time. Our diet isn't great, but no fast food. That's good. That's a good start. Coffee is the best breakfast, so I'm told. Be like Michaela Peterson and be straight up carnivore. So Michaela Peterson is actually carnivore because she had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, which is probably the single worst diagnosis of all time. Rheumatoid arthritis is so bad it sometimes drives people to suicide, and for it to be present in a juvenile is absolutely excruciating, horrible, almost a fate worse than death. And she was on all sorts of medications that were making her sleepy, making her depressed, messing with her moods and all that stuff. And finally she changed her diet and came up with this wonderful solution that works really well for her. More power to her. I think you should eat what works best for you. And I will tell you right now that the standard American diet is not what works best for anyone. Seed oils are bad now. Why is there a new bad ingredient every 6 months? So this is something that I've noticed because I remember the freak out about fats, I want to say in the 80s or 90s. When that happened, they introduced a whole bunch of new ingredients that took the place because when you take fat out of a food, you're losing a lot of the flavor and certainly a lot of the filling factor, especially in like dairy and stuff like that. Yeah, so seed oils are apparently super, super, super processed, and they get a lot of toxins in with them over the course of being processed. A lot of fast food places make their fries in seed oil, and it's basically just heated and left hot forever, which is an incredibly bad way to deal with this kind of fat. I want to do like a full breakdown of what good fats look like and what bad fats look like. I know that good fats are available in fish and avocados, nuts, and stuff like that. So what I found when I was losing weight was that using whole foods is really the way to go. You can't order foods in. You can't trust someone else to make food for you because you don't know what's in it. You need to make your own food, and it takes a little more effort, and sometimes you have to prepare ahead of time, but it's absolutely worth it. It will make you feel better, and it will help you lose weight. Defund the U.S. Department of Agriculture dietary guidance 100%. Calories in, calories out equals butt size. It's simple math. Actually not true. I've always had a big butt, no matter how much I weighed, no matter how many calories in or calories out. That is a body fat distribution thing. Eat less or move more, or better yet, do both. If you move enough, you can eat almost anything you want. Also not true, I don't think. Personal trainers will tell you that abs are made in the kitchen. This is 100% true. If you are working out, but you are not keeping track of your diet, you're going to become incredibly frustrated, and you won't be properly fueled for your workout. You won't be building muscle. You'll be losing muscle. You'll be pushing yourself to do things that your body is not capable of. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm just telling you what I've seen. Personal trainer told me abs are made in the kitchen. The diet is 80% of losing weight and getting fit. All right, Google AI assistant used by phone scammers. No, corporatocracy, spectrum of tyranny, 100%. I prefer woman dates to mandates. Oh, I don't. Women think they know everything, and they're not. I think the biggest problem is people drinking their calories. Yeah, okay, so remember what I was saying about fiber and sugar? When you drink your calories, when you drink sugar, not only do you not even have to chew it, you're getting a ton of calories straight to your stomach with absolutely no effort on your part. Your body doesn't even have to process them at all. It goes immediately into your bloodstream with no barrier. And it doesn't make you feel full. So that's probably one of the biggest issues. Seed oils are terrible. Some vegetables have more carcinogens than cigarettes. No salt butter for the win. Obesity tax calling Mayor Bloomberg. Well, you can do whatever you like. It's not a tax. He told people that they couldn't have big gulps. That's not a tax. In Ohio, there are hospitals that exclude you as an employee candidate if you smoke. Yeah, that was the case at the hospital I worked at. You were not allowed to smoke. And it wasn't just nicotine they would scan you for. They would look for continine, I think it's called, which is something that stays in your system for up to 6 months after you smoke a cigarette. If you tested positive for that, you were out. They didn't want you there. Craziness. This went into effect over 10 years ago due to insurance premiums needing to be higher. Yeah. So the hospital, as I was saying, that I used to work at was able to give us extremely discounted policies that were actually really good because we were a hospital. This was our source of healthcare. In fact, when I needed shoulder surgery on my right shoulder in 2019, I was able to use that policy, and they literally covered all of it because I used their, their surgery, their operating room and their surgeons and everything. And it was fantastic. I was really, really glad to be in that situation. Japan has weight laws. If your weight is too much, they give you so much time to get it to X. After that date, they write fines. Interesting. Breaking news. Pentagon and the military has ended the vaccine mandate. Yeah, I saw that the military was ending the mandate. That's awesome. That's good news. Poor suckers who got it in the interim. Point of privilege. Calling it the elephant in the room may be insensitive to really fat people. I know. That was the point. It is the food. Yeah, of course it's the food. We're just eating too much. And we're incentivized to eat too much because the food we eat is chemically designed to give us that right mix of salt, sweet, crunch, and chew. Really interesting to look at a Doritos chip and say, why is it that I can't eat just one of these? It's very challenging to do. There's nothing natural in those. And there's a reason a Doritos chip looks like it does. It's because they want you to eat more of it and to feel less full. Body positivity should only apply to immutable characteristics, not outcomes that are overwhelmingly caused by poor lifestyle decisions and lackluster self-control. 100%. I remember when I saw an ad on the cover of a magazine that was talking about body positivity. And it was a couple super, super, super overweight ladies and a lady who had had an amputation. And I thought, you know what? You should be positive, body positive if you've had an amputation. You deserve to be. That wasn't your fault, as far as we know, assuming it wasn't, for example, for type 2 diabetes. And that's not something that you have any say over. You should be promoting body positivity for women who are really tall, women who are really short, women who have interesting quirks of their faces or limbs or whatever, stuff that they can't control. That kind of body positivity we like. Not so much for obesity. Excuse me. Before being a trucker, I was a chef. Nutrition was paramount in creating menus. A chef doesn't want to hurt customers with unhealthy food. Liz, I want to order you a large cheese pizza with chocolate cake as a dessert. How dare you? That doesn't even sound good to me right now. We order these pre-prepped foods. I know. I just said that about prepped foods, but they're very simple, wholesome ingredients. You can see all of them on the back. They don't involve food oils. All of them involve vegetables, and then just some kind of seasoning or whatever, what have you. And that is always really filling, and it's really helpful to keeping track of how much you're eating. I knew someone who had juvenile arthritis, and she had to have C-sections for both her kids because of it. Wow, it's crazy. People need to learn their heritage and eat what benefited their grandparents. Not everyone is built to eat the same diet, and it helps to learn from the past. It does help to learn from the past. It's good to eat wholesome foods that are organic or at least unmolested by pesticides. One fast food place I know for a while used cottonseed oil blend. Ugh, yuck. Isn't it healthier to have weight distribution in your hips, legs, and butts more than higher up? That's correct. Higher fat deposits indicate visceral fat around your internal organs. So when you look at a lady, if she has weight around her midsection, it's more likely that she'll have more significant health problems than a lady who has like a big butt, for example. I consider myself very lucky genetically. My mom also had a big butt, and it's not something that you can change. Talk about body positivity and how racist it is to like butts. But it is a good thing if you carry your weight there. And supposedly ladies with big butts also have smarter children. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm going to be judging my kid really closely. Okay, then the blob in the room. Yeah, let's talk about the blob in the room. Cow's milk is for calves. That's technically correct. It's also very good for humans. You shouldn't hate yourself for not looking perfect, but you need an appropriate level of understanding of the health repercussions, says Andy. 100%. Factor is great. We do enjoy Factor. They're a wonderful pre-prepared meal system that equals no food waste for us. I love it. Fleeting Floating Feathers, how dare you make me read that, sends me a sticker that says, cool, thank you very much. We all know avocados are healthy, so I welcome the avocado sticker. 100%. Sour Pat's Sour Lids is well spoken. I tend to trip over my words if I have to talk too much, but whatever. I think we all do to some extent. Just makes me more personable, I suppose. All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in this lovely Tuesday. I appreciate your time and your chats and your super chats especially. We have a lot to think about. I'm really optimistic about the state of the GOP moving forward, and I hope that we can all use this moment of nonsense from the American Pediatrics Association to realize that we need to take good care of our kids and good care of ourselves and eat right and do right for our children and for our families. Thank you all so much for joining me this evening. Join me next time, tomorrow night, same time, same place. And until next time,